frozen Apache woman collapsed in the cold and woke up in a quiet cowboy's bed. Snow covered the land in thick, uneven layers, hiding the familiar paths and turning the open ground into something dangerous and silent. The sky was a pale gray, heavy and low, as if it pressed down on everything beneath it. The wind moved across the plains without mercy, cutting through clothing and skin alike. She walked alone. The Apache woman had been traveling since early morning, her steps slow but steady at first. She was used to long journeys and difficult weather, but this storm was different. The cold was sharper than she expected, biting deeper with every mile. Her boots were worn, her coat thin in places, and the snow crept inside no matter how tightly she wrapped herself. Each breath felt heavier than the last. She did not walk because she wanted to. She walked because she had to. Behind her was a place she could not return to, and ahead of her was the hope of shelter, work, or at least warmth. The land had taught her many lessons since childhood: how to read the sky, how to listen to the wind, how to keep moving when the body begged to stop. But even the strongest knowledge sometimes failed against nature's full force. The wind grew louder, almost like a warning she could no longer ignore. Snowflakes turned into sharp needles against her face. Her fingers stiffened inside her gloves, and she struggled to feel them. She stopped once just for a moment, leaning forward with her hands on her knees. The cold rushed in the second she paused, wrapping around her like a heavy weight. Just a little farther, she told herself, though she was no longer sure where farther was. Her legs trembled as she pushed on. The ground beneath her feet felt uneven, hidden by snowdrifts that rose without warning. More than once, she stumbled but caught herself before falling. Each step took more effort than the last, and her thoughts began to blur. Memories came and went in pieces, faces, voices, places that felt far away now. The fence line appeared suddenly through the falling snow, dark wood standing against the white ground. It was not a destination, but it was something solid, something real. She moved toward it, hoping it marked a nearby ranch or road. Her vision narrowed, the edges fading as if the world itself were slowly disappearing. She reached the fence and placed a hand against it, the wood cold and rough beneath her palm. The touch grounded her for a brief second, but it was not enough. Her knees weakened and her body leaned forward. She tried to grab hold, but her fingers would not obey her anymore. The ground rose up to meet her. She collapsed beside the fence, her body sinking into the snow. The cold wrapped around her quickly, stealing what little warmth she had left. She wanted to move, to stand up again, but her limbs felt heavy and distant, like they no longer belonged to her. Her breathing slowed, each breath shallow and uncertain. The world grew quieter. Snow continued to fall, covering her boots, then her legs. Her thoughts drifted in strange directions. She remembered sitting near a fire long ago, the sound of voices around her, the comfort of warmth on her face. She remembered laughter and the smell of food cooking and the feeling of belonging. Those memories felt soft and far away, like dreams that faded when you reached for them. Her eyes fluttered closed. Somewhere beyond her fading awareness, a sound broke through the silence. At first, it felt like part of the storm, wind moving differently, snow shifting. But then there was another sound, steady and rhythmic. Hooves, slow, careful steps pressing into the frozen ground. A horse moved along the fence line, guided by a man who knew the land well. The cowboy had been riding back toward his cabin, his coat pulled tight, his hat low against the wind. He was not a man who rushed through life. Every movement he made was measured, shaped by years of working alone in wide, open spaces. He did not expect to see anyone out here. The shape in the snow caught his eye, not because it moved, but because it did not belong. At first, he thought it might be debris caught against the fence or an animal resting, but something about it felt wrong. He slowed his horse and leaned forward, narrowing his eyes against the blowing snow. Then he saw her. She lay still, half-covered, her dark hair spread across the white ground. For a moment, he did not move. The cold had a way of taking lives quietly, and he had seen enough winters to know what stillness could mean. But instinct pushed him forward. He dismounted quickly, his boots sinking into the snow as he stepped closer. Kneeling beside her, he brushed snow away from her face with his gloved hand. Her skin was cold, but when he placed his fingers near her mouth, he felt it, a faint breath, barely there, but real. "She's alive," he murmured, more to himself than anyone else. There was no time to think about why she was there or where she had come from. The storm was still strong, and she would not survive much longer out in the open. He knew that much for certain. Carefully, he slid one arm beneath her shoulders and the other under her knees. She was lighter than he expected, and that worried him. Lifting her was not easy. The wind fought against him, and the snow made every step harder. He carried her to his horse, moving slowly to keep his balance. With practiced care, he secured her safely, making sure she would not slip or fall. Then he mounted up and turned the horse toward home. The ride back felt longer than usual. The cowboy kept his eyes forward, guiding the horse through familiar paths now nearly hidden by snow. He felt the woman's stillness behind him, and he checked her often, listening for her breathing, willing her to hold on just a little longer. His cabin sat alone on a stretch of land most people avoided, small but sturdy, built to withstand winters like this. Smoke rose faintly from the chimney when he arrived, a sign of warmth waiting inside. He dismounted quickly and carried her inside, shutting the door against the storm. The cabin was quiet, lit by the glow of a fire already burning low. He laid her gently on the bed near the hearth and began working without panic. Years of living alone had taught him how to act in emergencies. He added wood to the fire, then carefully removed her wet outer clothing, replacing it with dry blankets. He did not rush. He did not speak much. His movements were calm, respectful, focused only on keeping her alive. As the fire warmed the room, color slowly returned to her face. Her breathing grew steadier, though she did not wake. The cowboy sat nearby, watching, listening to the wind howl outside and the fire crackle within. He did not know her name. He did not know her story. But he knew the land, and he knew that no one deserved to be lost to the cold if there was a chance to save them. Outside, the storm continued its work, covering tracks, erasing signs of the day. Inside the cabin, time moved differently. The woman lay between sleep and waking, held there by warmth and quiet. Somewhere deep within her, life held on. And for the first time since she began her journey, she was not alone. The night passed slowly, measured by the quiet sounds inside the small cabin. The wind pressed against the walls, and the snow tapped softly at the windows, but the fire held steady. The cowboy stayed awake in his chair near the bed, adding wood now and then, watching the woman breathe. He did not sleep deeply, only closing his eyes for short moments, always alert to any change. By morning, the storm had not fully ended, but it had lost some of its anger. The wind eased and the snow fell more gently. Pale light slipped through the window, touching the rough wooden floor and the edge of the bed. The woman stirred slightly beneath the blankets. Her fingers moved first, slow and uncertain, as if she were testing the world before facing it. The cowboy noticed at once. He stood quietly and moved closer, careful not to startle her. He placed a cup of warm water on the small table beside the bed and waited. Her eyes opened, unfocused at first. The ceiling above her was unfamiliar, and the smell of wood smoke filled her senses. Confusion crossed her face, followed by tension. Her body stiffened, and she tried to sit up too quickly, then winced as weakness pulled her back down. "Easy," the cowboy said softly. His voice was calm, low, and steady. He took a step back instead of forward, giving her space. He did not reach for her or raise his voice. He only stood where she could see him, hands relaxed at his sides. She looked at him carefully. He was tall, with weathered features shaped by sun and wind. His clothes were simple, worn by work and time. There was no threat in his eyes, only concern and patience. "Where am I?" she asked. Her voice was rough, as if it had not been used in a while. "My cabin," he replied. "Found you out in the snow last night." Her memory came back in pieces. The storm, the cold, the fence, the ground rising to meet her. She pressed her lips together, nodding slowly. "You're safe," he added. "Storm's easing, but you needed warmth." She studied the room again. It was small but clean. A fire burned nearby. The door was shut tight against the cold. There were no signs of chaos or fear. Still, she pulled the blanket closer around herself, her instincts not fully at rest. He noticed and did not comment. "I can step outside if you want," he said after a moment. "Or stay quiet, whatever helps." That surprised her. She had expected questions or demands or at least curiosity. Instead, he offered her control. She took a breath and shook her head slightly. "You can stay," she said. "Just don't crowd me," he nodded. "Fair enough." He moved back to his chair and sat down, keeping a respectful distance. The silence returned, but it was not heavy. It felt careful, like both of them were choosing each moment instead of letting it rush them. After some time, he pushed the cup of water closer with his boot. "Small sips," he said. "Helps." She reached for it slowly, her hands still shaking. The water was warm, not hot, and it eased the dryness in her throat. She closed her eyes briefly as she drank, then handed the cup back. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You're welcome." They spoke little after that. He checked the fire. She rested. When she slept again, it was deeper this time, her breathing even and calm. The cowboy used the quiet to tend to small chores, cleaning, preparing food, checking supplies. He moved softly, as if afraid loud sounds might break the fragile balance between them. Later, the smell of something simple cooking filled the cabin. When she woke again, her senses were sharper. Hunger stirred in her stomach, reminding her how long it had been since her last real meal. "I made some soup," he said, noticing her eyes open. "Nothing fancy, but it's warm." She hesitated, then nodded. He brought the bowl and placed it on a small stool near the bed. He handed her a spoon and stepped back again. She ate slowly, carefully, as if each bite mattered. The warmth spread through her chest, and her hands steadied. With each spoonful, the tightness in her shoulders eased just a little. "You didn't have to do this," she said after a while. He shrugged. "Didn't feel like much of a choice." She looked at him again, seeing him more clearly now, a man who lived alone. A man who stopped when he did not have to, that mattered. "What made you stop?" she asked. He thought for a moment. "Didn't look right. Snow's got a way of hiding things, but I've learned to notice when something doesn't belong." She nodded, understanding that kind of knowledge. The day passed quietly. The storm finally moved on, leaving the land white and still. Sunlight reflected off the snow outside, bright enough to hurt the eyes. Inside, the cabin stayed warm. She rested, gaining strength slowly. He checked on her now and then, but did not hover. By evening, she could sit up without feeling dizzy. She wrapped herself in a blanket and moved to the edge of the bed. The cowboy placed a chair nearby so she would not have to stand. "You travel alone?" he asked gently, not as an accusation, but as a simple question. "Yes," she answered. "Long way, long enough." He accepted that. He did not push for more. "I'm staying here until I can move," she said, more like a statement than a question. "That's fine," he replied. "Cabin not going anywhere." Another silence settled between them, this one easier than before. The fire cracked softly. Outside, the world rested under snow. That night she dreamed again, but this time the dreams were steadier. No falling, no cold, just quiet moments and steady ground. When she woke before dawn, she felt something she had not felt in days, control over her own body. The cowboy was already awake, sitting at the table with a cup of coffee. He looked up when he heard her move. "Morning," he said. "Morning," she replied. "You feeling stronger?" "A little, that's something." She stood carefully, holding onto the bed at first, then straightening on her own. Her legs trembled but did not give out. She took one step, then another. Each one felt like a small victory. He watched but did not step in unless she asked. When she finally sat down across from him at the table, she let out a slow breath. "You saved my life," she said. He looked down at his cup, uncomfortable with the weight of those words. "Just did what needed doing." "Still," she said, "not everyone would." He did not answer that. The quiet between them grew deeper but not distant. It was built on small acts, warm food, shared space, and respect. Two people from different paths brought together by chance and cold. Outside, the sun rose higher, shining over the snow-covered land. Inside the cabin, recovery continued, slow but steady. The woman was no longer frozen and alone in the storm. She was awake, alive, and beginning to understand that sometimes survival came not from strength alone, but from someone choosing to stop when the world kept moving on. The next few days moved slowly, like the snow melting under weak winter sun. Time did not rush inside the cabin. It stretched gently, giving the woman space to heal and the cowboy room to adjust to having someone else under his roof. Neither of them spoke much about it, but both felt the change. The woman woke each morning with a little more strength than the day before. At first, she stayed close to the bed, moving carefully, listening to her body. The cold had left her muscles tight and sore, and sudden movements made her lightheaded. But she did not complain. She had learned long ago that quiet endurance often kept a person standing when noise did not. The cowboy noticed everything without pointing it out. He placed a chair where she might need to rest. He kept warm food ready but never insisted she eat more than she could. He opened the door only when the weather allowed, letting in fresh air without chilling the room. His care showed itself in actions, not words. One morning, she stood by the small window looking out at the land. The snow lay smooth and untouched, broken only by the fence line in the distance. The world looked peaceful now, nothing like the harsh place it had been when she collapsed. "I thought I was going to die out there," she said quietly. He was fixing a loose board near the door. He paused but did not turn around. "Winter doesn't forgive mistakes," he said, "but it also doesn't care who you are." She nodded. "Still, you came." He tightened the last nail and set his tools down. "Was riding home, right place, right time." She looked at him then. "People say things like that when they don't want credit." He met her eyes briefly, then looked away. "Credit doesn't keep a fire going." She almost smiled. As her strength returned, she began helping with small tasks. At first, it was simple things: washing cups, folding blankets, sweeping the floor. The cowboy did not stop her, but he also did not assign her work. He let her choose what she could handle, and that made the effort feel lighter. They shared meals at the small table, sitting across from each other in quiet understanding. Sometimes they talked about simple things: the weather, the land, the way animals moved before storms. Other times they ate in silence, listening to the fire and the distant sounds outside. Neither silence nor conversation felt uncomfortable. It was a rare balance. One afternoon she asked, "Why do you live all the way out here?" He leaned back in his chair, thinking. "Land's honest, doesn't pretend to be anything else." "That's not the full answer," she said gently. He gave a small nod. "People complicate things." "I understand that," she replied. He looked at her again, seeing more than just a traveler now. He saw someone who carried her past quietly, the way he carried his. Some stories did not need to be spoken to be understood. Later that day, she stepped outside for the first time since waking up. The cold still bit at her cheeks, but it no longer felt deadly. The cowboy stood nearby, pretending to check the fence, though he watched her closely from the corner of his eye. The snow crunched beneath her boots as she walked a few steps away from the cabin. The sky was clear, pale blue, stretched wide and open. She took a deep breath, filling her lungs with cold air, and felt grounded. "I don't remember much after I fell," she said. "Just fading." "That's how it happens," he said. "Quiet." She turned to face him. "You didn't hesitate," he shrugged. "Didn't see a reason to." She studied him for a long moment. "You could have ridden on." He did not deny it. "Could have. But you didn't." "No." They stood there, the distance between them filled with unspoken understanding. She knew there were reasons behind his choices, shaped by things he did not share. And he knew she carried a history that did not need explanation to deserve respect. That evening, as the light faded, she sat near the fire while he repaired a torn glove. The shadows moved along the walls and the warmth filled the room. "I'll be leaving soon," she said. He did not look up right away. "When you're ready." "I don't want to be a burden." He glanced at her then. "You haven't been." "That's kind of you to say. It's honest." She nodded slowly. "Still, I won't stay longer than I should." He accepted that without argument. He was not a man who held on tightly. He understood the need to move forward even when staying felt easier. That night she dreamed again. This time she dreamed of walking without fear, of open paths and steady ground. When she woke, she felt rested, clear-headed. The next day she helped him outside, handing him tools while he fixed part of the fence damaged by the storm. The work was quiet, steady, and comforting. The land stretched around them wide and open, reminding her how small people were against it, and how strong they could be together, even briefly. "You ever think about leaving this place?" she asked. He wiped his hands on his coat. "Thought about it once." "What stopped you?" He looked out across the snow. "Realized I already was where I needed to be." She considered that. "I'm still looking for that place." "You'll find it," he said, "or it'll find you." As the days passed, her movements grew stronger, more confident. She no longer needed to rest after every task. Her laughter even slipped out once, soft and surprised, when he told a dry joke without changing his expression. He noticed. He did not comment. One evening she packed her small bag, laying her few belongings neatly on the bed. The cowboy stood by the door, watching quietly. "You don't owe me anything," he said. "I know," she replied, "but I won't forget this." "That's enough." She paused, then added, "You treated me like a person, not a problem." He met her gaze. "That's how it should be." They sat together one last time near the fire, not speaking much. Words felt unnecessary now. What mattered had already been shown. Outside, the land rested under the fading light, calm and open. Inside the cabin, two lives prepared to move forward again, changed in small but lasting ways. The woman was no longer the frozen figure in the snow. She was strong again, steady on her feet, carrying something new with her, proof that even in the coldest moments, kindness could appear without warning. And the cowboy, quiet as ever, returned to his routines knowing that the land had brought someone into his life for a reason, even if only for a short while. Sometimes that was enough. Morning came softly, without hurry. The sun rose pale and calm, touching the snow with light that felt gentle instead of cold. Inside the cabin, the woman finished packing the few things she owned. Her movements were steady now, no longer careful like before. Strength had returned to her body, but something else had settled in her mind as well, a quiet awareness that this place, and this time, mattered. She tied her bag closed and set it by the door. For a moment she stood there without moving, listening to the familiar sounds of the cabin. The fire crackled. The kettle warmed on the stove. Outside, a bird called once, sharp and clear against the silence. The cowboy sat at the table, repairing a strap on his saddle. He worked slowly, his hands sure. He had known this moment was coming, but knowing did not make it feel lighter. "You don't have to leave today," he said without looking up. His voice was calm but honest. She smiled faintly. "If I don't go now, I might not go at all." He nodded. "That happens." She walked to the window and looked out. The path ahead was still covered in snow, but it was walkable now. The storm had passed. The land had opened again. "I've been moving most of my life," she said. "Stopping feels strange." "Sometimes stopping shows you things you miss while moving," he replied. She turned toward him. "Like what?" "Like yourself," he said after a moment. She thought about that. In the quiet days here, she had remembered who she was beneath the tired steps and long roads. She had remembered her strength, but also her limits. And she had remembered what respect felt like. They ate breakfast together, simple and warm. Neither rushed. When the dishes were cleaned and the fire tended, the time felt complete. Nothing more needed to be done. At the door, she paused. "I never asked your name." He hesitated, then gave it. "Elias," she nodded. "I'm called Naya." He repeated it softly, as if to remember the sound. "Safe travels, Naya." She met his eyes. "Thank you, Elias, for stopping." He opened the door for her. Cold air rushed in, sharp but clean. She stepped outside, adjusting her coat, and took one last look at the cabin. It stood quiet and strong against the wide land, just like the man inside it. She began walking. Elias watched from the doorway until she became a small figure against the snow, then turned and went back inside. The cabin felt different now, larger somehow, and quieter in a new way. He sat at the table, staring at the place where she had sat only minutes ago. Life returned to its usual rhythm, but not entirely. He found himself listening more closely to the world around him, the sound of the wind, the creak of the wood, the slow passing of hours. He realized that solitude could still hold memory, and memory could bring warmth. Days later, Naya reached a small settlement. She found work helping in a kitchen, then later with sewing and cleaning. People there noticed her calm strength. They did not ask many questions, and she did not offer many answers. She had learned that some stories were meant to be carried quietly. At night, she sometimes thought of the cabin, of the fire, of the man who spoke little but saw much. She did not feel regret. She felt grounded. Weeks passed. Winter slowly loosened its grip. Snow melted into streams, and the land changed color. One afternoon, Naya stood outside the settlement, watching the road stretch into the distance. She knew she would keep moving eventually, but for now, she stayed. Far away, Elias repaired fences and tended his horse. He returned to his routines, but something had shifted. He found himself more open to the idea that life could bring change without warning, and that change did not always need to be resisted. One evening, as the sun dipped low, he rode out to check the far edge of his land. The fence line stood strong. The snow had nearly disappeared. When he reached the place where he had found her, he stopped. The ground looked ordinary now. No sign of the storm, no sign of the moment that had changed two lives, but he remembered. He turned his horse back toward home, feeling steady. Some meetings were brief, but they left marks deeper than time. The land stretched wide between them now, but both carried the same truth. Kindness did not need explanation, and respect could exist without promise. And that knowledge stayed with them, quiet and strong wherever they went. Spring arrived slowly, almost careful, as if the land itself wanted to be sure winter would not return. Snow melted into thin streams that cut through the fields, and the ground softened beneath the sun. The air no longer burned the lungs, and the wind carried the smell of earth instead of ice. Life moved forward. Naya settled into her days at the small settlement. She worked early mornings and late afternoons, helping wherever she was needed. Some days she cooked, other days she cleaned or repaired worn clothing. The work was steady and the people treated her fairly. She spoke little about her past and no one pushed her to explain. In time, she earned quiet respect. At night, when the world grew still, her thoughts often drifted back to the cabin. She remembered the warmth of the fire, the quiet strength in Elia's presence, and the way he never asked for more than she could give. She did not mistake kindness for something else. She knew it for what it was, rare, simple, and true. One evening, a traveler passed through the settlement. He spoke of distant places, of ranches and wide lands, of storms survived and roads traveled. As Naya listened, she felt the familiar pull of movement stir within her again. She realized that staying forever was not her nature. Rest had healed her, but motion was part of who she was. The next morning, she packed her bag once more. This time, her steps were strong and certain. She left before sunrise, following the road that stretched beyond the settlement, leading back into open land. Far away, Elias continued his days much as before. He repaired what needed fixing, cared for his horse, and worked the land. Yet he noticed changes in himself. He found that silence no longer felt empty. It felt full of meaning. He thought more often about people instead of avoiding them. The brief presence of another life had shifted something deep inside him. One afternoon, while riding near the edge of his land, he saw a figure walking in the distance. At first, he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. Then the figure came closer and recognition struck quietly. He stopped his horse. Naya approached, her pace steady, her face calm. She did not wave or hurry. She simply walked until she stood a few steps away. "I thought I might see you again," she said. Elias nodded. "I hoped I would." They stood there, the land wide around them, the sky clear above. No rush. No surprise, just acceptance. "I didn't come to stay," she said, "just to pass through and to thank you again properly." "You already did," he replied. "Still," she said, "some things deserve to be said twice." They walked together toward the cabin. Inside, the space felt familiar, unchanged. They shared a meal, talked about where she had been and where she might go next. The conversation flowed easily, like it had never stopped. That night, they sat outside, watching the stars rise. The land was quiet, peaceful. "You ever think about leaving now?" she asked. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but I don't feel trapped anymore," she smiled. "That matters." When morning came, Naya prepared to leave again. Elias walked with her to the edge of his land. "You'll be all right," he said. "So will you," she replied. They parted without promises, without sadness. Some connections were not meant to hold tight. They were meant to remind. As Naya walked on, she felt lighter. She carried no fear of the cold anymore, no doubt in her strength. And Elias returned to his cabin, knowing that even the quietest lives could hold moments that changed everything. The land remained wide. The paths remained open. And both moved forward, shaped by one winter, one storm, and one simple choice to stop.